Well, welcome again, everyone, to day four of the 17th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Ailes. I'm your moderator. We have with us today Sarah Wackerbarth from the University of Kentucky. She's got a doctorate in industrial engineering. She focuses on challenges of implementing sustainable change in the health delivery system and teaches in-person, hybrid, and online graduate level courses. Um, she's in the University of Kentucky College of Public Health. We also have with us Dr. Madeline Miller, who's who's a faculty slash instructional consultant at the University of Kentucky, has her doctorate in public health, uh, has a research emphasis on health professions education. So their session today is going to be using small cycles of change to improve online learning experiences. So Sarah and Madeline, let me turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for inviting us to join you. This is my first time participating in this conference, so I'm really excited to not only learn more about it, but also be invited to speak. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share a presentation for you. Okay. And everybody let me know, of course, my gosh, we've been doing this for 5 years, but let me know if you can't see it or if something looks funny. But today we're going to be discussing using small cycles of change to improve our and your, hopefully, online learning experiences. Okay, so I'd like to start off with a little bit of audience engagement for you. Maybe you've seen Slido polls before, but if you'd like, please go to slido.com and punch in 2488755 or hold your phone up and scan that QR code. And we'd like to ask, what is one teaching problem or challenge that's kind of forefront of your mind right now? What are you working on? What are you noodling on? What are you thinking about? Okay, making sure that our assessments are secure, how to keep those students lively, engaged with us in the classroom. Very common. Yep, student engagement, secure examinations. Freedom in course design. Okay, so maybe using things that were passed down to you, but how do you put your own stamp on it, maybe, or how do you kind of do what you feel is best? Another one for increasing student engagement. Okay, getting colleagues to be better online teachers. Okay, so sometimes, yes, it's not all about us, it's about what we owe our colleagues or what maybe we owe the people we supervise, in terms of helping them be more comfortable, more confident. Yeah, hopefully, this presentation gives you a couple nuggets, things that you could take back. Yeah, and isn't teaching just also such a group activity? At times. Okay, ensuring students are actually writing their own assignments. Yes, particularly noteworthy and notable in AI as we see more and more AI platforms, rising up and competing. I mean, I can't even keep track of how there's Claude, there's ChatGPT. I mean, yeah, there's so many. So it looks like a lot of the activity in the poll has kind of stopped. So a lot of us are thinking about big questions, our assignments, how to help our colleagues, how to get our students engaged, how to make our courses really our own, and how to make sure that our exams are secure. And so these are all big big questions, big problems, right? Well, Sarah and I want to introduce to you some concepts of engineering. First and foremost is this idea of quality management. And we would argue that you can take these problems and you can break them down and you can look at them through a quality management lens, or you can look at pieces of them through a quality management lens. All we're really talking about here when we talk about quality management is a process, any type of process where you're taking a big view of the activities that are going on, the tasks that need to get done, what needs to happen in order for there to be a certain desired level of quality or excellence in the thing that you're doing. And of course, if you're an engineer, you're thinking about the product that you're making or the service that you're providing. And so at first blush, doesn't really sound like this has a lot to do with education, but stick with us, it does. And you've probably already brushed up against quality management before. There's some very famous, notable names here. Unfortunately, not too many women, but we've got Eli Whitney, Frederick Taylor, Henry Ford, Edward Deming, Shewhart, Juran. The list goes on and on. We've got a lot of historical figures that have helped bring quality management into history, into kind of a more prominent place. And from their thoughts, their writings, their experiences, you may have heard of some familiar approaches to quality management. We've got a Toyota factory here in my home state of Kentucky, close by in Georgetown, and they're always advocating for Six Sigma or lean classes for their employees. You may have also heard of something called TQM or total quality management. So quality management has a long and established history in engineering, some very famous and notable names attached to it. But really, all we're talking about here is what needs to get done for there to be this level of excellence, this desired level of standard of quality that we want to reach. So regardless if you're talking about Six Sigma or total quality management or lean or some other type of quality management process, there's going to be some common principles. All of these processes, all of these thinkers are emphasizing these principles in greater or lesser degree. There's going to be a focus on your customer, on your stakeholder. There's going to be a focus on the type of leadership that you provide. There's that engagement piece where how do you make sure the people who are either relying upon you or walking along with you are engaged? They're part of what's going on, they're part of the activity. There's a process approach where you are kind of getting down, drilling down into the fine details of what the heck are you actually doing, what's going on. And then you're looking for opportunities for improvement, for growth, for maintenance of a high standard. But you're going to engage in those improvement practices using evidence and data. So you're going to be performing evidence-based decision making. And while all this is going on, you need to make sure that you're managing relationships with your customers or with your stakeholders and with those people who are engaging in these efforts with you. So regardless of how you're approaching quality management, these are key elements, key aspects that you need to juggle, you need to take account for. And your ultimate goal is to, again, meet or exceed the expectations of the people who are relying on you or on those stakeholders. And so we're going to go back to one of those notable names, frankly, Edward Deming. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Deming cycle. And so what we did in Sarah's class, what Sarah did, is we looked at the PDCA cycle popularized by Deming. And the focus of that cycle is making improvements using small cycles of change. So all the problems, all the issues that you're kind of thinking about, that you're working on, those are big things, but you can break them down into smaller, more manageable chunks or tasks, as it were, to kind of think about, okay, how can I get closer to seeing the desired result? What needs to happen? So we would argue that using this PDCA cycle is what's going to enable you to kind of shrink some elements of those problems into manageable bites and lead you to processes where you can actually make corrective efforts, where you can actually influence your situation to see the sort of outcome and use the resources available to you to achieve the outcome that you're hoping for, be it a more secure examination, be it greater comfort with teaching online, whatever it is. And so with our PDCA cycle, just an acronym for not really good acronym, but just an acronym for plan, do, check, act. With plan, you're going to explore your problem, collect some data about it, and start generating potential solutions or start identifying them. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel. You can also conduct a little research and see what have others done in your situation or what other resources are potentially out there that you didn't know about. Then you're going to actually try something. And the smaller scale of this cycle can help you, if you're kind of risk adverse like me, trying something on a smaller scale can make problem solving a little more manageable, a little bit less scary. So try just one thing, one potential solution. You're going to then collect more data, check on what's going on, and try to get a sense of if the thing you tried is actually working. And then if it worked, great, blow it up. Do it on a bigger scale, do it longer, whatever greater implementation looks like in your particular circumstance. But you also want to go and continue to monitor for impact and look for any unintended consequences that may arise later. Finally, repeat as needed. If this is successful for you, if this is sustainable for you, great. You've solved part of your problem, or maybe you've solved the whole thing that you were working at. But this PDCA cycle is a small, kind of more compact way of solving pieces of your problem and working towards a full solution. As Sarah likes to say, and I'm borrowing this phrase from her, you don't have to boil the ocean, as it were. These are small cycles of change. And so we're going to spend the rest of our time kind of talking about this PDCA cycle and how it went for us, but I want to set the stage for you very quickly. So the course in question here was a public health course. That's both mine and Sarah's background. It was CPH 683, UK's Operations Quality and Safety course. It's online, it's asynchronous. Those of you who are in online courses, who are teaching asynchronously, you already know some of the things that go on in this space and some of the challenges when we compare it to online or when we compare it to face-to-face or in-person situations. The course is focused on skills to improve the healthcare delivery system. And our learners were graduate level. These are all public health learners, surprise, in the Masters of Public Health program. They're online, mostly mid-career or early career. But then there was also MHA, Masters of Health Administration students in the course too. This is mostly an on-campus program, but they are still taking some online courses. And they're also similarly early, maybe earlier in their career than the MPH students. So we had a mix of grad students, very capable. Some of them are more used to the online environment than others, but everybody's pretty early in their journey.
All right, thank you, Madeline. I'll take it from here a little bit. This is an actual rendition of me teaching this course, right? So I'm happily along teaching the course, moving through the different modules, and I think things are going well, right? But I'm really missing the ability to make adjustments based on student feedback. You know, the kind of quick feedback I used to get when I teach, I'm used to getting when I teach in front of a full class of students. You know, those quick changes that you make on the fly based on students' questions or quizzical looks. In this way of teaching, my only source of student feedback is really how they perform on assignments. And by the time I get a chance to review those assignments, the instructional part of the course has moved on. Many modules have posted in the interim. So my real problem is a delay in the feedback. I'm getting feedback, but it's coming to me too late for me to do anything about it. And so, you know, I was faced with this issue. This was the problem. And so I decided to use the PDCA cycle in order to see if I could make an improvement. And I chose this method because, again, as Madeline said, you know, I didn't have time to do a huge solution, boil the ocean, but I wanted to make some impact if I could. So the next slides, we kind of walk you through the different phases of that PDCA cycle, and I show you how I used it in this case. So the first step is to plan. And in this stage, you'd actually step back and make sure you explore the problem, collect data, and make sure a problem really exists, right? Versus you just having a bad day and overthinking something. So in this stage, I actually examined the cadence of the course and confirmed that if I was relying solely on homework, that there would be a 2-module delay in my ability to make changes based on that feedback. So a significant delay did exist. It wasn't just all in my head. At this point, I didn't have any solutions identified per se, but I knew that whatever I did, I wanted to require real minimum effort on both my part, because I was busy teaching several classes, and the students' part. I didn't want to add to their burden. And I also wanted to adhere to sort of the best practices in feedback. So they're written on this slide, but if you want to get feedback from a customer, it's best practice to provide them a way to give it to you anonymously. Again, low effort. You got to use it quickly, express appreciation, and also provide information to let them know how the feedback is being used. If you keep doing that, then people will continue to give you feedback. So the next slide is the planning stage, or the do stage of the cycle. And what I, informed by the planning stage, you figure out what you're going to do. So at this point, I'd collected some information about different options, and what I decided to pilot test, right, was something called a quick poll, and that's just a name that Madeline and I came up with. But basically what it was is a little quick poll, a little Google poll that was embedded into the module, and students were asked to complete it. So to step back for a minute, what we did to implement this is I reviewed the course and identified certain modules, certain instances in the flow of the material where it would be really important for the students to know that content before moving on to the next, right? Where information was really critical for understanding to understand subsequent modules. In those instances, we introduced a quick survey, basically just using a Google form, something that we were comfortable using. Again, low burden on us too as course instructors. And we also made the polls really short. We limited ourselves to 4 questions. And so from a student's perspective, what they saw embedded in the module was a request, say, hey, can you let us know how we're doing as instructors by completing this poll to let us know how we're doing. We would get those results really quickly and time to analyze them, define some action items that we wanted to do. Basically, it could be like adding an extra video or going through a topic again, adding to that planned module, how we were going to fill in knowledge gaps that might have been identified by the results of the poll. In order to fill out the whole feedback loop, right, we'd share through a Canvas announcement. Our university uses Canvas as its learning management system. So we'd make a Canvas announcement to the students, telling them briefly the results, but more importantly, what we were going to do to make the course better based on closing the gap and meeting their teaching needs or their learning needs. And then of course, we'd make those changes in the next module, and the next module would be released, and we'd feel like we were doing a little bit better job meeting their needs. So again, back to the next slide, we were needed now to check whether or not we were moving in the right direction, right? We've implemented something. Is it helping? Is it moving us in the right direction in terms of increasing our ability to get feedback in a timely way so that we can make changes. Also, we didn't want to do any harm, right? This is where those unintended consequences come in. So we were also interested in determining if we were placing undue burden on the students and so forth, right? And so we had 3 specific questions that we were interested in collecting data on to see if our pilot was working for everyone. So we wanted to look at if the students were, completing the poll, right? Because we need their input or else it's not going to work. And then we asked some specific questions in the midterm evaluation to determine if they found it acceptable. And then back to us, was it providing us timely information so that we can make changes? So just as a quick, we have 3 graphs on the next 3 slides just to share some results of that, right? Because we're testing to see if what we're doing makes sense to fully implement. So first of all, our first question was, did the students complete the poll? And it varied, but we had at least 75% of the students completing the poll. So again, we're getting a heck of a lot of information that allows us to make changes. So we're happy with that. The midterm evaluation on the next slide, we asked specific questions on the midterm evaluation to determine if the students found this to be acceptable, right? Did they find it to be easy to use? Did they understand were they comfortable providing us this information and so forth? So a lot of information on this slide, but the thing to take into note quickly is everyone was either in the green to yellow phase, right? Good is green, right? Green, good, all the way just a couple in the yellow. No one was in the orange or red. And so students found using the quick poll to be acceptable. So that was a good takeaway. We're feeling pretty good about what we're piloting. The last question, probably a really important one for us as instructors, was, were we getting the feedback back in a timely fashion so that we could go ahead and make changes to the next modules? And so we just kept sort of a list, and a lot of information on this slide, but the important part is the 16 in the lower corner there. We made 16 changes to modules that we wouldn't have known to make, based on this feedback. So again, there's me happier in the corner there because I feel like I'm getting valuable feedback, able to implement changes, and again, improve my teaching, and most importantly, meet the students' learning goals. So we're all the way up to coming up the end of that cycle, and we got to decide if this is worthy, right? So the final step is to act. So based on the results of the pilot, that data that I shared, we decided to formally implement this in not only this course, but other courses that we're teaching. And then the next steps, of course, because you're never done in a continuous quality improvement type world, is we're actually going to see, and we're doing that right now this semester, if having the quick poll in the course actually does improve learning outcomes, does improve students, perspective of feedback and how they're being able to contribute to the teaching of the class. So we have some questions to sort of evaluate implement this intervention a little bit more deeply.
Okay. And so we've walked you through our big example from our course, but we also wanted to make sure that you had a resource to take away with you. I don't know about you, but I'm a very visual learner. And so Sarah created this PDCA worksheet that can help you, I guess, kind of serve as a thought organizer. And so here we would encourage you to write it down, start writing it down, start getting descriptive. If your initial thought is, oh my gosh, my problem is just so much bigger than PDCA, or my problem is it's just way too big. Maybe it's multiple small cycles, trying multiple things. Okay, this worksheet could help you organize those thoughts. And as you start to kind of parse through the details, I think you'll find opportunities to break problems down or break issues or questions down into smaller, more manageable chunks where you can try this cycle. So I put the link in the chat to the course schedule. I kind of struggled with UK has a privacy setting on its cloud, on its OneDrive, but this worksheet is fillable and it's linked to the course schedule. I've got a link to that course schedule in the chat. All you have to do is go to today's session and you'll see the little link labeled worksheet under Sarah and my presentation. But I would encourage you, make some copies, download this worksheet, and try it. Um, you know, if we went back and kind of parsed out the example we just gave you on the worksheet, here it is kind of spelled out the problem we want to solve. Or a problem we want to solve that also arose in this class was Sarah was noticing there's lots of late homework submissions. And how did she know this was a problem? She collected some data, the timeliness of those submissions and how steeply it decreased between lab 2 and lab 3. And she loves a run chart. I used to call those line graphs, but I've learned a lot from Sarah. But she collected some data on the timeliness of her homework submissions, and that data, the percentage of on time submissions, kind of became her guiding point, or her North Star for this problem. And so when she took it into the planning stage, okay, I think there's a problem with how timely homework submissions are. They seem to be getting later and later. Look at this decrease between lab 2 and lab 3. Let's collect some data. Let's make a run chart of the percent of on time submissions and track how it changes over time from assignment to assignment. Sarah was also asking her students for input, kind of speaking candidly. Are you turning things late? What's going on in your world? Are there barriers that you're facing? What data can you share that's relevant to this idea of the timeliness of homework submissions? From there, she tried something, just changing the day homework is due. Sometimes students, they're in these programs, they're in these cohorts, they've got other obligations, and it's not that your course isn't or shouldn't be just as much of a priority as their other courses, but there's ways that we as instructors can often be strategic. If you know that all the students are in another class, that class typically has big assignments due Wednesdays at 11:59 p.m. You could make yours due Thursday or Tuesday, not Wednesday. Something that kind of breaks it up and lightens the mental burden on students just a little bit. So one small change that was piloted was just changing the day homework was due. And then to check on that, yep, collecting more data, monitoring it, and checking to see if the solution was working. This entailed more run charts to kind of monitor the impact. And we saw once Sarah just changed the due date from Wednesdays to Thursdays, just gave students an extra cushion where she could in a way that still worked for her as an instructor, we saw that data go right back up from 78 to 89% timeliness. And yes, there's been variations, but that original dip didn't reoccur. And so switching the due date, just padding it out a little bit by a day, seemed to be working. And so, if it works, continue to implement it in your ACT phase of this cycle. So Sarah, going forward, now Thursday is her big due date for this course. But run charts are still coming in handy to kind of keep an eye on the timeliness of these assignments. And so again, this is a thought organizer that we have available to you on the course, or excuse me, on the conference schedule website. If you experience issues downloading it from there, we've also got our email addresses posted here, and I can put them in the chat if you like. Please feel free to reach out, and we can also just send you a PDF of that in an email attachment if that ends up being more convenient. So again, one last time for summary, as Sarah was planning this, she was asking students for input, but she was also, creating run charts to kind of monitor how the timeliness of homework submissions was changing. She thought there was a problem. She piloted changing the day homework was due. She checked it by creating more run charts to monitor the impact of this due date change, noticed that it seemed to be working, and has continued to implement this on a larger scale for additional classes and implement it into future semesters because it works. And so it's appropriate for her to use it on a larger scale. So at this time, I know we threw a lot of engineering information at you, a lot of new kind of quality management details at you, but we're happy to take questions if you have any. Hi, Gregory. Hi.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. This is really interesting. The question I have is, I know with Canvas, that's the learning management system that I use as well. And this is also, I know, possible D2L. A Canvas survey can be used as a requirements within a module. So that idea of collecting feedback from students, right? You mentioned using Google Form. As you were saying, I was thinking, oh yeah, I could do the same thing, but I could make it a survey and then make it a requirement. So students have to complete it before they can complete the module and make that module a prereq for subsequent modules on it. My question is your, do you think there's any utility, or what do you think the changes would be if you made the feedback mandatory? Because in my situation I just described, the students must complete the survey. Now, I suspect my students, as I am sometimes, I'm not as thoroughly honest on a survey if I need to just get it done. But is there utility in again, making it short, little questions like you guys have? Do you think it would improve the quality of the feedback? Or no, the question is, what effect do you think it might have on the quality of the feedback? It would definitely increase the quantity.
Mm-hmm. So I think you've talked us through the trade-off that you'd be making there, right? It might be functionally easier and for the flow of a module, if you know how to use, that Canvas survey thing, you putting that in right there makes it so easier for you. Students wouldn't have to leave Canvas, click on something and fill it. So it's functionally easier. You would definitely, if it's a requirement, everyone would respond to it. So you'd have full response. I think the only issue that I can see, and you started to get there, would be the potential for, if folks are being honest, or what we used to call in industry just pencil whipping through it, right? Like people pencil whip through a check sheet if they have to do it. And that's where sort of this idea of making it anonymous and also optional for students comes into play, because that's one way to make sure that the data that you do get actually is reflective, because people actually have to do something different, right? Have to make the effort to do it. So that would be the only issue that I would see, is that I would caution that you wouldn't just get people just, doing fives down the board just to be done with it.
Yeah. I think this is a separate issue, but I work in a teaching and learning center. And, kind of what we also talk about too is relationship building and relationship informed pedagogy. And there is a difference, as you've already said, and as Sarah already said, between making somebody do something and giving them the option of doing something. And so I would also say that there's probably an impact bigger than your small cycle of change, or bigger than the thing you're trying to do, on your relationship with your students, just in terms of, oh, like this person really cares about our learning, and there's these optional opportunities for us to kind of be heard or to voice things. Like I think it changes your relationship with your students just a little bit when they think like, I don't have to do this. There's no teeth behind it, but my learning is being so centralized that there's this quality improvement measure going on. So I would also argue, the optional nature of it may impact your students' kind of relationship with you in small but subtle ways.
Yeah, thank you. That reminds me, another thing I really like that you shared is turning around and giving the feedback back to students, right? Sharing the results of the survey with them. I think that's really neat. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your questions. Let me see. I can only see a couple faces at a time. So if you have your hand raised, feel free to unmute. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, here are our references. And of course, we are, I think our email addresses were listed in the course schedule. So if anybody would like to reach out, Sarah and I are always happy to keep talking about this further. And thank you so much again for this opportunity to share this with you. Thank you.
Oh, Sarah and Madeline, thank you for taking time to do it. It was very useful information. Man, as
Thank you so
Gregory
much.
is clapping.
That's kind. Thank you.
So we have another session at the top of the hour. Hopefully folks can join us. So thank you very much.